All right, welcome back to part 2 of lecture 1. Let's get right into our lecture. We left off with the question, something is very unusual about the supply-demand graph on the left. What is it? And the answer is that when we look at the normal graph on the right, notice that the supply curve is up and to the right is normal in economics, and the demand curve is down and to the right. Now I told you an important change was that we've changed price to yield on the left, and the result of that is that supply and demand curves have now switched. The supply curve is moving down and to the right, and the demand curve is moving up and to the right. That's unusual. The reason that's happening is because of the relationship between yield and price. It would be possible to use the right curve in a securities supply-demand or securities economic analysis, but we're probably going to use the left curve based on yield more often. So let's understand the relationship between yield and price. Price-yield relationship. The relationship is an inverse relationship. For any security, typically we're thinking about bonds because bonds have a particular kind of yield based on an interest rate, but it also applies to equities which might have a dividend, and in both cases, both bonds and equities, there's the concept of capital gain, which is an indirect form of yield or a non-current cash flow form of yield. But for now, we'll think about interest on bonds, dividends on equities. For any given security, the lower the price, the higher the yield, and the higher the price, the lower the yield. They have an inverse relationship. As a result, when we replace price with yield in the curve, the supply and demand curves change places. So keep that in mind whenever we're working with supply-demand curves and securities. Let's do an exercise to understand how this inverse relationship works. Let's take a bond investment that has a price of $1,000 and an annual interest payment of $80. What we want to look at are the price and the yield of this security. So we need to calculate the yield, which I've done here by dividing the annual interest payment, or the annual cash flow, by the price of the bond. And that gave us a value of 8%. Now, let's use the same structure, cash flow divided by price, to calculate, first, if the price increases to $1,100, what is the yield? And then, if the yield increases to 8.50%, what is the price? So let's go to the whiteboard. And let's set up our original calculation. It was complete in the PowerPoint. 80 divided by 1,000 equals 0.08, which equals 8.00%. The first question is, if the price increases to 1,100, so we've changed one of the two numbers in this calculation. We're not changing the 80. We're changing the price to 1,100. So now we pay a slightly higher price for the same annual cash flow. What does that result? 80 divided by 1,100 is 0.0727, which equates in percentage terms to 7.27%. Now notice what's happening with the price and the yield. The price of 1,000 is an increase from 1,000 to 1,100. The resulting yield is a decrease from 8% to something less, 7.27%. Now what I want you to do is take a moment and see if you can think about what math to do to answer the final question, which is a bit more challenging mathematically. If the yield increases to 8.50%, what is the price? Now looking at our board, what numbers do we have? We have the number 80. We have the answer, 0.085. Now what you need to do is you need to solve for price. This is an algebra equation. 80 divided by x equals 0.085. So pause the video, take a moment to work through that calculation, and then we'll come back and solve together. Okay, welcome back. Let's see how we solve this question. Well, what we need to do is we need to isolate the x. And the way we will do this is in two steps. We're going to multiply both sides by x. When we multiply the side on the left by x, we're eliminating times x and divided by x. And that gives us 80 equals 0.085x. Now let's divide both sides by 0.085. The values eliminate on the left side, and now our solution is the value 80 divided by 0.085 is x, and that value is $941.17. So again, notice what is happening to the price-yield relationship. When we change the yield to 0.085 or 8.5%, the yield went up from the original 8%. Notice what happened to the price. The price of $941 is a decrease from the original price of $1,000. So in these two examples, we see in one case a higher price produces a lower yield, and in another case, a higher yield produces a lower price. Whichever number you start with, the yield or the price, when you work through the math, you'll find that an increase in one always results in a decrease in the other. Now let's look at this in supply-demand curve analysis. We're going to see two examples of how to do a supply-demand analysis for securities. In our first example, note that in supply and demand, yield drives price. First the yield, then the price. So we determine what the appropriate yield is, and then the price will either go up or down. So let's see what's happening in this example. First, the market yield increases. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show what is happening as I talk through the slides. First, the market yields increase. There's an increase in returns in the market. So all investors are now expecting to earn a little bit more money from their investments. Now, this particular investment at point 1 has a yield of some amount. And in order for the yield to go up, because that's what's happening in the market, to satisfy the investor, this investment's yield also needs to go up. How do we get to this point? Well, something is going to change, and what is going to change is the demand. The demand is going to decrease. We're going from demand 1 to demand 2. Why is it demand decreasing? Well, because this low-yielding security isn't as attractive as it used to be. There are higher returns in other investments, and so owners of this security are going to sell. That decreased demand means they're going to sell their investment. When demand decreases and the supply stays the same, we shift from point 1 to point 2. And the key point, or the key concept to get here, is not what is the change in supply. There is a change, or there's a change in quantity. The important point is to see what's happening to the yield. Again, the yield is going up. So when market yields increase, how does that affect this individual investment? It's no longer as attractive because it has a relatively low return. The investors want a different investment, so their demand for this investment goes down, which means that they sell, and we can see that the movement on the curve results in a higher yield for this investment. And when the yield goes up, then the other owners will stay in the investment. What drove the yield up is the selling made the price go down. When people start to sell and there's no change in supply with investments or any product, the price is going to go down. Let's look at a second example. In this case, market yields decrease. And now the investment that we have is relatively attractive. It has a high yield compared to other investments. Investors want this investment, so they begin to buy. Let's look at where we are in this case. Starting at point 1, I have a yield that is some amount. And when market yields decrease, everybody wants in on this investment. And so we move to point 2. Demand has gone from 1 to 2. Demand has increased. And when demand increases, more people buy. That additional buying increases price, just like it would in any product, not just securities. Additional buying with no change in supply will increase the price. And now what's happened is when we look at point 2 on the yield axis, the yield has gone down. So what is happening in this second example is market yields decrease. This relatively high yield investment becomes very attractive. More investors come in and buy. That buying activity increases the price. And as we know, the inverse relationship between price and yield means that the result of an increased price is a decreased yield. And once that yield goes down, then people stop buying because it's not as attractive of an investment anymore. It's at the market level and it's reached equilibrium. And we're going to finish up with this analysis, complements and substitutes. Think back to economics. What is a complement? What is a substitute? You'll be able to do some research on your own. I'm not going to answer this question now. I'm going to leave this open for you in concluding the lecture for you to think about and do some research on. Complements and substitutes relate to the following question. When home loan interest rates go down, a loan that someone would use to buy a home, when those interest rates go down, first, what do lenders do? Do lenders like this decrease in interest rates? Do they want to lend more money? Or do they not like the decrease and therefore they will lend less money? And then the second question is, what do home buyers do? Do home buyers like it when interest rates on home loans go down? And how does that affect their decision to purchase a house or maybe decide not to purchase a house? So are these responses, the lender's response and the home buyer's response, similar or are they different? And I would like you to be able to explain why they are either similar or different based on your understanding of the concepts we've been discussing and applying the economics concept of complements and substitutes. That concludes Lecture 1. And the next activity we have is a case study analysis that we're going to work on in class together. I'll see you in class.